Hello, hello. Welcome, everybody, to another Spiritual Substack chat. I am your host, Zen from Wizen Temple, WIZZAN, wizentemple.com on Substack. I want to invite everybody to follow if you want to get the notes and access to my notes and subscribe. If you want to get notified of article when I publish articles, special content, announcements about the Mystery School, Wizen Oracle, Wizen Grimoire. Also, the links to my guest Substack and my Substack will be below the video once it renders about 30 minutes after we complete our conversation. And if you would like to be on the podcast, I invite you to message me through the profile, and I would love to have you join the community and share your thoughts. Hello, Taylor. Welcome to the conversation.
Thank you. Glad to be here. This is my first time being live on someone else's Substack. Normally, I'm the one interviewing, so this is pretty novel. I love it.
Well, I'm really excited about this because, I'm magic and the occult path is something dear to my heart, and I'm really excited about hearing your take on various topics. Taylor Elwood is a magical experimenter, cutting-edge occultist, and author. He says he will show you how to get consistent and better results with your magic and spirit work. On his About page, his partner is there, right there, and they together. You could tell me what's that?
Me and Sheena.
Okay, you and Sheena, and then you have a on your About page, you have what we stand against and what we stand for, and so maybe to start off, you could kind of summarize that and then a little bit about what you do and what your Substack's about.
Sure. So it's the Magical Experiment Substack, and I've been practicing magic for over 30 years, and in my time, I've always been a bit of a maverick and an innovator and an experimenter. And one of the most important things that I've discovered about occultism and esotericism is that a lot of times there's a lot of technical jargon and occult and esoteric terms and a lot of flowery language and things like that. And underneath that, there's a narrative where it's kind of like, you do magic a certain way and that's the way you do it. Or, sometimes what I hear is just do magic. You don't need to know how it works or things like that. And I find that to be really odd and myopic. And so that's what I'm against. And then what I'm really for is just a curious inquiry as to how magic works and how to get better and consistent results and how to make it approachable so that anyone can do it. That there's not exclusivity or elitism or anything like that. I mean, I'm all in favor of a little bit of mystery, but I think when it becomes the most prevalent aspect of the magic, that actually takes away from why people do it. And in my experience, certainly my own personal experience, but also in just working with people over the years, both as an author, as a consultant, and a teacher and all that, is that most people really do want to understand, how and why magic works. But a lot of times what's put out there is not necessarily set up to be easily understood. And I think that it doesn't really serve anyone when we're kind of asking ourselves, well, how does this work? How do I get consistent results? Why is that person over there doing it, but I can't, or anything like that? So a huge part of really what we're for is about making magic accessible to anyone who wants to practice it, and also showing people how to personalize their magic, which is what magical experimentation is about.
Yes, right. That's definitely something is a big focus of my work, is to craft your own talismans and craft your own sigils and I part of what I'm sharing is to create your own oracle. All of these things, the process of it is so important. Now on your Substack, so you have Magical Experiments University right here.
Yep.
Right there. And I just want to show everybody your Substack, if I may. So you do, so you've got live stream interviews.
Mhm.
and you post articles, and you have kind of like what I'm cooking is like a mystery school sort of thing. Please share with us what this is about.
Sure. So, the Magical Experiment Substack itself is articles and content that, articles and magic, because she hates the word content, so I got to remember that. Articles and magic that Sheena and I, put together and that we're sharing. Um, sometimes it's me writing the articles, sometimes it's both of us. Sometimes we're doing interviews with each other, and then sometimes I'm interviewing other people.
Mm.
Um, it's also, I've written a number of books over the years: Process of Magic, Pop Culture Magic, Space Time Magic, a whole bunch of other books, and
Oh, really? They're on Amazon?
they're on Amazon. You can also order them directly from my website.
Oh, we must
magicalexperiments.com.
we must look at these. What is it? What is it again?
Uh,
The
well,
address?
so, magicalexperiments.com. And then we also teach classes on magic. We're currently in the process of revamping some of the older material and freshening it up.
Okay.
So for example, right now, this week, I'm working on the Principles of Magic course, which originally was 11 principles. Yeah, that was me, a younger version of me.
Look
11.
at your bad self.
That's right.
That's awesome.
11. 11 originally, the Principles of Magic was about 11 principles of magic that I found that were like underlying core principles that informed like how magic works. We've
Right.
In the years since, as I've continued experimenting and exploring, that's expanded to 20, and so we're sharing what those principles are in that class and walking people through how they can identify those principles and apply them to their magical works. That's going to be coming out next week, a freshened up version of it. And we're going through some of the
Let me
other
show
classes as well.
everybody on the left side. I don't know. I'm kind of a promotion geek. Um, there's ebooks, there's books. I mean, I didn't know you had this website. I'm just looking at it now. It looks like a big giant digital grimoire of all sorts of goodies. Events, services, classes, ebooks, books, How Magic Works series, pop culture magic series. This really demonstrates the level of time and work you put into this and the length of that you have been at this. Um,
Yeah, we're going to be freshening the website up as well a bit. We need to get Sheena added to it for one thing. I mean, she and I have recently gone into business with each other, as far as this goes, and been together in the last year. So
okay.
this is kind of, we're still integrating some of those things. But yeah, it is. I mean, it's over 32 years of magical practice that is kind of represented on that site, and with all the books that I've written and all the things that I've done over the years.
And how many books have you written?
Total number of books at this point, I believe, is 53. Now, some of those are fiction and fantasy books. A few are
Yeah, I was
business
just
books.
gonna say
Yeah,
you've
well,
got
that's a magic book. That's the first solo magic book I ever wrote, which is about integrating pop culture and magic. So a lot of the books are about magic and occultism, but from a experimental take. And then, as I said, I have some fiction, and then I also have like a book on men's work because I also am a men's coach. So I wear a
right.
variety of different hats, do a lot of different things.
That's neat. Yeah, because Christopher, whom I had a conversation with yesterday, also works in a men's group. Here's your story.
Yep.
You'll have a page on your story. Okay, so maybe we could touch on that. I'm curious about how it started for you. What drew you into this path, and what are your most significant inspirations? I'm sure there was Austin Osman Spare, Crowley, whoever. Who was it that um, sparked that fire for you, or was it sparked a different way? But I know with all these years that you've been at this, you've chewed on all of them. Um, all of the great occultists, Israeli Regardi, Christopher Hyatt, all of these
So,
left-hand paths.
I got into magic when I was 16. I was a born again Christian at the time, but I found, the idea that all the answers were supposed to be in one book to be, to the universe to be very problematic, and also just kind of I've always been a very curious person, lots of questions and things, and so what really drew me to magic was curiosity, because it felt like with magic, I could actually get my answers questioned, and that I was the person who could
Right.
answer them, explore.
Right.
And over the years, I've had a number of influences. I mean, first, I would say, I first got into neo shamanism and elemental hermetic magic. So, I read a lot of Ted Andrews. That was an early inspiration. And, a lot of people think of Ted Andrews as like animal magic and stuff like that, but he actually did a lot of
Okay.
really interesting stuff with like elemental spirits and nature spirits, and a lot of work with elemental hermeticism as well.
Okay.
And then, as time went on, I got into, chaos magic. I got into Taoism and Dogen. I explored different teachers,
Peter
ceremonial.
Carroll.
Yeah, Peter
Peter
Carroll,
Carroll.
Bill Nye. And then, I also explored like, some of like the classic ceremonial and ritual magicians such as Franz Barden and William G. Gray,
Hmm.
who did some really amazing cutting edge work out there. I was never really a big fan of Crowley. I always found like there's a good example to me of somebody who made magic overly complicated, and so I'm
Hmm.
not a fan of that.
Yeah,
Uh,
Thelema is like it's like when you get involved in Hinduism or you got to learn a whole language. There's a lot of hoops you got to jump through, to be able to get something out of the system. But I would agree with Thelema. You know, it's a it can be a challenge.
yeah, so I mean, and then over the years, I've developed my own systems of magic as well, because I was pretty much an experimenter from almost the beginning. The first year or two, I would read books and faithfully replicate what was in there. But then I started to notice gaps and start asking questions, and then kind of come up with my own solutions. So,
Mm.
I developed, like the pop culture magic series was like the first one. It was integrating modern pop culture with magical work, because I found that it was really like it wasn't like it couldn't be done. There were ways to take magical processes and rituals and practices and apply a pop culture lens and still get results. And then I got
Can you
into space.
explain that? I'm sorry. Before
Yeah,
we go
well,
further, because you're mentioning pop culture a lot, and I'm not getting the connection. You could break that down for us.
sure. So when we think of pop culture, you might think of like comic books, fiction or
Mhm.
fantasy, TV shows, social media, even AI right now would be an example of pop culture. Um, and so it's kind of a combination of modern technology, but it's also the culture itself. And the way that I look at it is that, there's magic in and of itself. When we look at magic as a process, what we come to understand is that if we understand the fundamental foundation of magic, the, the process aspect, then we can swap a lot of stuff out and still get consistent results. We just need to understand
Right.
the operating principles. And so
Right.
with pop culture, it's just really kind of putting into place, like, let's say you have, you really meaningfully identify with a form of pop culture, like a fantasy series or a TV show or whatever else. You could meaningfully connect with the characters of that and develop rituals around that in order to
Like
do
psychodrama.
right. And
Yeah.
so I mean, and that's kind of the gist of what pop culture magic is. And of course, I'm continually, as with all my systems, continuing to experiment and evolve. Like, we're going to
Mhm.
be later, hopefully later this year, we're going to be starting to work on a book called Pop Culture Technomancy, which is going to be the next iteration of this particular system, Sheena and I. But then, I've also developed other systems like Space Time Magic, Inner Alchemy, the How Magic Works series, and then the Walking with Spirits series. And all of these are just my different experimental explorations of specific topics in magic that really fascinate and interest and intrigue me. And a lot
Well,
of
isn't that?
really, oh, go on.
I was just gonna say, isn't that the current? I'm not necessarily talking about the occult current, but that's the flow is curiosity. I mean, that's what I want to hear is sincerity and curiosity from somebody who's opening themselves up to the mystical. those are like those. When I hear that, I'm like, oh, you're good. You're good. You follow that, right? Is there any other reasons, if you're just hungry for power, that sort of thing, as that can get you in trouble. But there's a sense of wonder of this that I think protects the novice on the initiatory path. Um, I want to real quick share something. Look at this is the when you click on the university link. This page also has, because I just want people to see how the amount of work that you've put into um, you know that you're offering, and so that they can follow and subscribe and such.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, we're going to be revamping a lot of those classes, but they are good. They are really amazing courses that
Okay.
I've developed, and I sometimes also teach and co-teach with Sheena. We do some live classes as well, but lately we've just been kind of focusing on building a little bit of a different foundation on with what we're doing, and we're both really excited about it. For me, magic is driven by curiosity and imagination and wonder. Like yeah, there is that aspect of people wanting power, and I get it. I mean, I think that can be valid in and of itself, but I think a lot of times it's really important to balance that out with that sense of curiosity and wonder, and like, well,
Yeah.
what are the hidden possibilities that we can uncover and bring into reality?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, I relate it to the Kundalini and the dragon, awakening the dragon, that fire, that power, that Shakti. Yes, but if you just go at it for the lust for power, you miss out and you could get in trouble. And if you really want it, you need to know how to access it, to balance it. Um, and so it is tricky. And that's why it's so important for people who, in our culture, I'm sure you've heard me talk about this, because everyone has access to information, and you can just read a book and jump on YouTube. And if you're attractive enough, you'll have a big audience. And next thing you know, you've deluded yourself into being a seasoned teacher. And it matters. It matters the time and the experience, the direct experience someone has had in order for them to be qualified to be able to, share to a certain depth, depending on how long they've been at it. And I think that's a missing element, in going further back. I mean, I think about the old Zen masters and, the indigenous tribes where they'd have the elders and you'd sit with the shamans. And why did you do that? Well, they're older than you and they've been at it. And yet we also have a very aberrated culture too. So not everybody that's older is necessarily wise. They may be addicted to something, or they may just be in an orthodox religion or something. So I think we miss that, and I think there's a reason for that. That doubt that younger people on the path have, and so I think we're um, hopefully we're seeing more of this coming forward. Teachers like you and people who have actually walked the walk and know how to teach it with balance.
Hmm.
Um, yeah. And I'd love to know, what I was thinking, what I'd love to know is maybe you could explain, maybe in a nutshell, your concept of magic, what magic is for you. Um, kind of consolidate it. If someone was like, oh, I'm interested in your university, um, what would you tell
So
them?
my concept of magic is that magic is a process with specific operating principles that can be applied to get consistent results and turn possibilities into reality.
Mm, simple enough.
Yep. I really don't believe in needless complexity when it comes to magic. There's far too much of that out there as it is.
Yes, I'm with you too. What is the shortest distance between 2 points?
Yep.
You know, um, So you have attraction magic, you have the process of magic, principles of magic, meditation mastery, emergency magic. What is emergency magic?
Well, we all have moments of crisis, right?
Mhm.
If something happens, and I mean, I'll even share a personal example. A few weeks ago, my car got hit by a deer. I was 7 hours away from home in rural Washington, and it was a situation where there was definitely a calling in of some of that magical work, that needed to be done in an emergency, because And it was amazing. A lot of things happened in a very short period of time that were really that I don't think could easily be explained away other than through magic. Getting hit by the deer, but then, having a guy come by like with a truck that was a fireman who was able to tow my car to a safer place on the highway where I had better signal and could get the service I needed to get the car towed down to the little town I ended up in. And then being in that little town and like there being like no place to like really stay because they had a rodeo that weekend, and Sheena finding a place for me to stay. She's up in Canada, so she wasn't down there with me. Um, and then just this guy giving me a free sandwich at the subway because he was like, "Hey, I want to make sure you have some dinner tonight." Like, you didn't have to do that, but it was really, that was like the only restaurant in town. Just, other things that ended up happening, and there was an intense period in that moment where like that Sunday where I ended up just meditating and like really just surrendering all my fears, my anxiety, everything else that was going on at the time. And out of it, being able to come up with a plan that ultimately got my car and me to Spokane, where I could then, get a rental car to get home and get everything sorted out. It was a very powerful experience because there were a lot of variables where I didn't really have control of the situation. But I was able
Right.
to let go of that need for control and invite in things that needed to be invited in. And I was definitely being looked out for as well, which helped. But it was such a powerful experience. And so when I look at magic a lot of times, like with emergency magic, there are moments where something could happen. There could be a crisis. Like, what do you do in that moment? you know, and
Mhm.
and the tendency can be to try and hold on, like kind of take a white knuckled approach to everything and hold on for dear life. But really what we ultimately want to do is let go of those things and be open to discovering what the possibilities are and inviting them in. And sometimes that can be a very powerful experience in and of itself. So that's what emergency magic is about. It just kind of walks you through what you can do and also being able to surrender to the moment.
Yes, and that's what I think the average person, it's like we're in the magic, like fish in water, but people aren't aware of the incantations in which they are, the power of their words and the things that are occurring. It's just a matter of being able to see the water, and I think magic is a path to awakening to the forces and the energy around us. I'm curious about synchronicity. And
Mm.
I don't think I need to ask you if you experienced it because I already know it's part of the path. Any thoughts on you began your curious journey early on? Your history with synchronicity. When did this begin to happen for you? Are there any particular experiences that stand out? Um,
There's lots of experiences. I mean, that started up pretty much from the beginning. I mean, synchronicity is really the experience of magic coming through in ways that you can't fully anticipate or understand, but you know that magic is working. So, I mean, I've had synchronicity show up in the form of different people coming into my life at just the right time and the right moment, having the right results come in at just the moment I needed it. And a lot of times I can't fully explain that, but what matters, that doesn't matter. What matters is I did the magic. I understand that part of it. And then I let it go out into the world and do what it needed
mm,
to do to bring things in order to change the reality I was in.
um, okay, I want to throw a couple hot potatoes on your lap just for
Okay.
fun.
I'll see if I can juggle
What?
them. I don't want to, they
Yeah,
might be pretty hot.
just the first thing that comes to you. Ask you I'll ask you two polarity questions. What do you love about magic?
Mm. What I love about magic is the experience of connecting with the unseen world, the spirits, the forces around us, and being able to connect with them and collaboratively create something new and transform our identity in the process. That is absolutely amazing, and it's just brings such a deep sense of wonder and joy to my every time I do it.
Okay, What repels you about magic?
Not so much about magic, but what does repel me is the needless complexity. The things that, like the
Yeah,
esoteric jargon, the,
that's what I meant.
the
Yeah.
yeah, the terminology, the languaging, the tendency for people to not collaborate and work together. Like sometimes I've seen a lot of pettiness in the occult, magic, pagan communities over the years, and I think it's really unfortunate when it comes up because there's so much more we could be doing and offering to each other and the people around us. So I think it's really important to get clear, like what matters to us. And for me, that's one of those things where like, I don't want to really be part of that kind of current. So
Let's talk about that. Um, the community in general, the magical community in general, the esoteric community in general. Um, I'm sure because I'm sure if you, I imagine you've heard me mention this. I don't know if you've been watching the streams, but I spent I decided to go off the esoteric path and go into and explore pure atheism and just go after debunking everything I could, right? And I
mhm,
did it for published 1,000+ videos doing it, and I engaged it for that particular working, right?
mhm,
I wanted to see, well, let's see what survives, and I learned a lot about pretentiousness in the path, a lot about needing to be somebody to be seen on the esoteric path, which was really a solution to a part that was humiliated at the age of 5, right? Something that made a person not feel so good and adopted a self. And so they go into, the magic and they need so bad to be somebody, to be seen, to be accepted, to be validated. And they're all valid needs, right? But there's that unfortunately that gray area um, causes ripples of delusion, and people adhere to these illusions because they need them. And even if they're not conscious of it, their unconscious needs it and it fuels it with its psycho emotional energy. And so we could talk about the Wiccan community, we could talk about the left hand path community, all of this, and the gradient
mhm.
of genuine forms of this. And again, people are younger on the path. This is part of it. You know, hit the wall, and you're going to go through all your delusions and stuff. So I guess I just want to invite you to share your perspective on your experience in the occult community.
My experience with the occult community is I've always been a little bit of an outsider on the
Mm,
fringe. Part of that's just been my magical experimentation. I mean, I remember having people stuffily tell me when I shared pop culture magic with them that wasn't real magic. I've certainly taken a little bit of flack over the years with some of the unconventional views that I share and the ideas and experimentation that I do with magic. And that's okay. I'm not for everyone. Not everyone's for me.
right.
That's the reality of life. And I think being on the fringe, it just kind of makes me appreciate a bit more like what is on the fringe and some of the weirdness and some of the discovery that occurs there. And I mean, I think yeah, there are different people who are going to have their own views and perspectives and things. I think everyone has something to offer, and what I would really ultimately caution for anyone is question everything you learn from anyone. And I say this to
Right.
my own students, question what you learn from me. Just because I'm sharing it doesn't mean that I'm the automatic authority. I'm sharing with
Of
you
course. Yeah.
my experiences, but I'm also sharing with you my biases. I'm
Sure.
sharing with you my filters as well. So question that and get curious because that's part of like how we discover, who we are. And each
Mm,
person is their own ultimate spiritual authority is my perspective. That's the thing that I
sure.
encourage for people. And I
Yeah.
always say, like, question everything, question what someone shares with you, because then you're discovering for yourself, like, what really works for you. And
Right.
what works for you may not work for me. And that's okay. It doesn't have to. Magic is a very personal path in a lot of ways. I mean, I talk about the process of magic, and I fundamentally do believe that there is a foundational level, a foundational knowledge of magic that you share with anybody, you share the principles, things like that. That person can take that and get results. But I
Hmm.
also think that there's a large part of that, a large part of that power is the personalization. How do I bring my identity and my experience and my process into that? So, there are going to be some things that people would do that I wouldn't do. And that doesn't matter what well, that's valid. It just
Yeah,
makes it their thing. So owning that and taking responsibility for that, but not trying I think, avoiding the one true wayism that sometimes shows up in uh, different religions is really like something that is important to kind of keep in mind. Like we don't really need to see that in the occult, esoteric, or pagan community. And
yeah.
sometimes we do. Sometimes I have seen that there. And that's not something that I'm really a fan of or want to have in my spiritual practice. So that's a good example, I think, of kind of like my take on it. And again, I think really when I look at the occult community in general, it it has its own biases and filters as well built into it. There is a lot of romanticism of the mystery. There is a lot of occult esoteric jargon and terminology. And I think sometimes that is used to exclude people and that actually goes against really what I think fundamentally magic's about.
Um, yeah. So what I guess I want to unpack a little bit more of what I was pointing at, and
Okay.
your response gave us a wider picture where you're coming from, which I think sets it up better for us to go a little deeper in what I was pointing towards. Israeli Regardi would said he wouldn't work with students unless they had a year of psychological work. And so I didn't ask this as specifically as I could have. Um, so what are your thoughts about, when someone's new, because everyone has their own unique thing, and that's the whole point of bringing out your signature. And I think any legit teacher is going to help give them the tools like you're giving them so that they can, through their own work, bring forth their deepest self, their true self, and undo the things that, but the childhood stuff and the psychology, and that's specifically what I'm asking is, because anyone younger on the path, if they bypass their psychological complexes and stuff and they jump right into magic, that's where we see, the person who I've lived in Sedona for 26 years, so I've seen it all. Sedona is like one of the hot spots of the new age. I've seen people have experiences and the synchronicity, they start having intense synchronicity, and the next thing you know, they're Quetzalcoatl, the return of Quetzalcoatl, or the return of Jesus. See, and it's because they haven't done that work. They have to prepare themselves for deeper occult experiences. So that specifically is what I was pointing to. Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so there's always the danger of delusion. That's what I'll
Yeah,
call it. And yes, I've certainly seen that. I mean, I've seen that in different things, and occasionally I've even gone down that path myself. I
that's
think
part of it.
it is part of it, and I think I think one of the most honest things that we can do is acknowledge and admit when we have gone down that road a little bit ourselves, or where we've made certain mistakes or things didn't quite work the way we thought. I think that's one thing because I think that doesn't happen nearly enough in the occult magical community. I definitely think that people ideally ought to be doing some kind of internal work or inner awareness work. And really, what I would even say is that, one time I would have said, yeah, just doing like some meditation and maybe meeting with a therapist and doing some internal work would be enough. But really, at this point, I would say that ideally people are sitting in a circle with other people and doing some kind of co-regulation with each other. And when I talk about sitting in a circle, I'm not like saying like doing magic together. I mean like getting together and being like, hey, here I am. I've joined this support group for whatever it is because this is an area or an issue in my life, and I'm going to share what my challenges are right now. Because really,
Mm.
at the end of the day, we all want to be seen. We all want to be heard. We all want to be understood. And that's one of the things one of the reasons why people get into magic. They want to be seen. They want to be heard. They want to be understood. They want a sense of power. And that's why they're trying to get that sense of power.
Right.
And when we have supportive community and we're able to have a space where we can be seen, heard, and understood, that actually deepens our spiritual work. It also creates a deeper sense of co-regulation and connection that's essential. I mean, I think that anyone who's doing magic ought to probably be doing some shadow work and experiencing some of that. And with all of it, tread carefully. It is really easy to get into a diluted space. It's really easy to buy into your own grandiosity and think, oh, like I can do X, Y, and Z. And those are the moments where life will rear up and smack you on the butt and remind you that you are not nearly as infallible as you think you are. And it can be important. I mean, I've had some amazing magical experiences over the years, and I've also had a lot of things not work out quite the way I hoped. And I think, the biggest lesson that I've learned is like be confident in what I do, but also make sure that I have the support systems in place, the people in my life.
Right.
And for me, not just going and seeing a therapist or doing like a year of work with a therapist. I mean, that can be helpful, but I think it's really more like where's the community connection that I have? Who are the people that I know have got my back and who I've got their backs and we're connecting together? That's kind of what I'm interested in seeing more so now for somebody who's practicing magic, because it can be really easy to get into the rabbit hole of like magical work and not have that balanced, grounded perspective that is needed, I think, if you're going to do this work.
Yeah. Yeah. That's something that I find essential on the path, especially when you start opening up occult forces in the unconscious, is the deeper you go, the more grounded you must be, because these forces will cause one to become delusional. And this is why they're initiations. One must experience the delusion to understand it. I don't think you can, there's this dream state, and the point is to awaken in the dream state. So you don't get rid of the dream state. You have the dream state, but it's just awaken in it so you can have it. And this whole inner realm and the way this whole thing works here, it's the reason why it's related to a labyrinth, and through all systems, as you know, it's going through the dark forest, the labyrinth. Why is that? Because the deeper you go, the more you open up these psycho-spiritual forces, and especially with Kundalini, when that stuff happens, I mean, people end up in crazy homes. They become frickin' messiah, and they start a cult, and they never come down. And that's why it's so important to root. Person has to root and make sure that they're able to, like a tree, be able to handle these things.
It's really easy I just want to say this, it's really easy for people to buy into their own power fantasies.
Yeah.
And that's like really kind of the thing to, I think, keep in mind. Like, yeah, you might have this fantasy about quote unquote having power, but what does that really even mean?
Mm.
I think that one of the most fundamental lessons that I've learned over the years is the less that I try to control things, the more the magic actually comes through and the more amazing and wonderful my life gets, because I'm not trying to put my hands on the steering wheel all the time.
Right. Right. Now that's an interesting topic to play with, because that opens up the issue of free will. Is free will an illusion? How much do we do what thou wilt? How much do we, I also think of the doing without doing, the Zen way, the gateless gate. And who's living here? Who is living? What is this allowing it to happen thing? How does this happen? How do you teach somebody to do the very thing you just said, to not be in control, not to try to control and to force it, lust for results? And how do you let go and let things, the synchronicity and the flow of life happen in and of itself.
So, one of the facets about my life that many people don't know, something I've been exploring and bringing out more, is that I'm a submissive man. And I bring this up because being a submissive man is really about surrender and letting go of control. And in my men's work, I actually work with submissive men, men who want to discover what healthy masculinity can look like through the lens of surrender and submission, which
Mm,
is counter to a lot of the narratives out there around men. So I share that because it's an important element of this magical work as well. Because for me, the way that magic really works is it's about letting in the magic. It's about receiving the magic.
mm, okay.
It's about, like I can go and do a magical work, right? Like, whatever it is, create a sigil, all that other stuff, and then put that out into the world. But I've also got to be willing to receive the result and let
Hmm.
it become part of my identity. And fundamentally, something needs to shift inside of who I am to meet that. And I think that a large part of it too is that I don't really ascribe to the idea of free will so much because we're a combination of so many different factors
Right.
and things. I mean,
Right.
leaving aside like most stuff, let's just even consider a person's family. You have a mother and a father. They have mothers and fathers that help shape who they are. So you have this ancestral line of people
Right.
whose decisions, whose trauma, whose experiences, and everything else have helped shape the two people that come into your life and quote unquote raise you. And you might have more than two people, you might like have a step parent or
Right.
whatever. And all those people end up shaping you. And you can spend half of your life literally just trying to get out from underneath their shadow to discover who
Right.
you are.
Right.
I've been done that. So, I think that like really fundamentally just really looking at this notion of individuality. Individuality is in a lot of ways it's very, very much an illusion. We live with each other. Unless you're a hermit out in the woods and living in a cave, you live with other people to some degree or another. And even a hermit is making the choice to live away from people because there is a response there on some level. And I'm
Right.
not saying it's a trauma response. It might not be. It might have been a consciously
Yeah.
chosen choice. It might be whatever it is, but there's still a relationship there. I mean, really what I look at it is all of us are operating from a place of attachment. And what I mean by that is like, am I okay? Am I okay with the world? Am I okay with myself? Am I okay with the people around me? And so when I
Right.
look at that kind of factor, I think that plays a significant role in like how and why we do magic. What are we seeking to really ultimately create for ourselves? Not just an individual journey. I mean, here you and I are talking right now. We're having this conversation. We're connecting. There's 14 people on here live that are watching this. Some people commenting, some people not. And all of us are, to one degree or another, interacting with each other. We're going to come out of
Yeah.
this conversation bringing that with us. So, am I really an individual or am I somebody who is continually connecting with the stream of culture, reality, magic, possibility, all these other different things and learning to work with that? And for me, that's really what it's about. It's being open to the experience and embodying it. I call this the process of experiential embodiment because it's really just this ongoing experience of life. So yes, on the one hand, I'm Taylor Elwood, and Taylor Elwood is a very fluid experience.
Right. Yes. It's a, I think ultimately when you deconstruct it, the more the deconstruction happens, the more for lack of a better word, we're the default self. Just awareness is present. I think that's from different systems I've chewed on, gosh, all of them. And at least the ones that I know about. And Advaita, some of the grapes I got from Advaita, was that popping of the volitional self, as Ramesh Balsekar and Nisargadatta taught. And these are insights. This is why an insight is something that happens through a meditative experience. And that's another little key on the path. One can only teach if they've been through it. The meditative or being with something and then knowing about it, right? Knowing about non-dualism. I remember when I had the insight, when the bubble popped, I remember exactly where I was at. I had an Advaita teacher for about 5 years, and I was just about to drink my coffee in the morning and pop. Now I understood, the whole, you are nobody, right? There's no free will and all this from the Advaita perspective. But what happens is people become nobody. And now they got a new identity. I am no one. And I used to watch these people come together in these non-duality little groups, right? And everyone would be talking about how they don't exist. And I got such a kick out of it, because these spiritual concepts become identities, right? And so you become this, and you look like it. And I'm thinking of the story I told this person I met recently named Alexander. And I said, you could liken it to, this is what came up to me. It was an orange, right? And an orange suffering from some type of trauma and identity crisis, and what it did to survive, because its natural self wasn't good, right? From the parents, you're bad. So it creates an image of itself. So in the field, in this inner realm, we create an image of ourselves, and the hardest ones to break through are the ones that are closest to the thing we want to be. So that's why when people get involved in Christianity or whatever system, that's why you must kill the Buddha, right? So you become, I am this now, right? And one of the most tricky ones I found was Advaita. I am now nothing and nobody. And so they go around talking about how I don't exist. And only until that bubble pops is the default being without any adding to it, right? But it's an insight. It's an insight. And that's a real tricky little key that I think it's really important to be taught right. It's really important. A seeker can take that advice or not, right? But if I want to be a carpenter, first thing I'm going to do is track down the most badass carpenter I can find and learn everything I can, all the tricks of the trade. And I just, I repeat this theme a lot, but I think this is just a theme that is missing in our culture, because so many things are handed to everybody, like this and the ancient ways of sitting with the tree. I said this earlier this morning in the earlier podcast, and I've been asked, many times over the years, Zen, give me a simple thing about, the path to enlightenment. I like to call it endeepenment, whatever. And I say, a real simple one. It's, you got to put the effort into it. And I could tell you stuff all day long. It's just me telling you stuff. You got to go direct experience to earn the pearl. And I'll tell them, I go meditate on a tree for 3 years. Get back to me.
And the question
Santa Claus.
And the question will be, will they actually do it?
Most likely won't.
They won't. I mean, even and
that's okay, because the not doing it is also important. Sorry to interrupt you, but
it is. I mean, a recent example that I had from one of the people that I work with sometimes, he said, record a voice note. He's like, if you're still listening to it by the end of a month later, then that's something you really want. Record a, like that, magic right there. Record a voice note of the life I'm living now is, and it's the life you want to live, but it's you're calling that in. If you're still listening to it 30 days later, that tells you right there that is the life you really want to live.
Nice.
Because at a certain point, you've committed enough to listening. I mean, and how often do we really commit to something that we truly want? and
Yes.
stick with it. It's easy to say I want this or I want that, but sticking with it is the key. And that's not something that just happens in a moment. It's something that takes dedication and a
Right.
decision that this is something that you truly want.
Yeah, because you don't know what the mountain's like. People can tell you about the mountain all day long, but you got to climb it. You got to climb it, or you're not going to know. Over the years, I've exposed Christianity. I used to be a Christian missionary and all of this stuff. And, I've had some Christians who's just like, wow, they hear something, right? But they're very indoctrinated and they're terrified, because this has become a solution to their emotional trauma. Well, what do I do? And I'm like, be more of a Christian. Dive into it. Really go into it so that you can really see what it is. And this is why I think this message is so important. And we're both pointing in that direction. And living that, I'm sure I could, you know, you reflecting me in this process, you got to do it. And you're not going to find out who you are if you don't jump in,
Yeah,
you know.
it's absolutely true.
Well, um, let's take a look if there's any messages. Folks, if you have any questions or comments for Taylor, feel free to share. Christopher says, yes, the magic is found in our awareness, our discovery of self, and ultimately our own surrender to the path that is shown to us.
Mm.
Reflections?
I mean, I think that's a really profound point about awareness. How aware are we? Awareness is one of the principles of magic, actually, that we explore in the class that I'm recreating right now. Because it's so easy to lack awareness. It's easy to go through life in a very unconscious way, to react instead of respond. And
Right.
what I would really suggest to anyone is to choose your response instead of reacting. It's
Mm.
in the moment, it can be in the heat of the moment, it can be very easy to react, but it's what we learn is that when we can respond, we get to make the choice. And when we're making a choice, then we're operating from a place of empowerment for ourselves, because that actually helps us create the outcome that we're looking for a lot
Mm.
of time. So, part of that is awareness.
Yeah.
Am I aware? Am
Yes.
I aware of myself? Am I aware of my biases? Am I aware of my filters? Am I aware of the blind spots and the other things? And am I aware of like what I really want?
Yes. And I would add is to, as you're being aware of things, is to not judge the reactiveness.
Yeah.
Oops, didn't respond. Wonderful. Look at that one. Look at that. You get to experience yourself reacting. This resistance to things is what keeps people trapped. I like the term radical acceptance from Ann Weiser Cornell, her book, The Radical Acceptance of Everything. I love that idea. Christopher said something really profound. I mean, here's the simple. In the being, the doing is done. In the doing, the being is done.
Mm.
Chew on that.
Yeah. That's an ontological, exploration. Really, one of the things that I've found fascinating with magic is that when we actually move away from doing magic to being magic, what we're really, this is part of that process of surrender I was talking about earlier. That's when we start to recognize that what we're fundamentally changing is our identity in relationship to ourselves, but also to the universe and the people around us. Like
Mm,
what a real transformation and change. So, the doing is done, right? So it's like, well, what is my being? What does that mean? And then in the doing, the being is done. So the doing is an extension of the being.
mm.
I think that's my
Right.
interpretation, but that might not be
Yes.
how Christopher looks at it, and so I want to acknowledge that. But
No, I absolutely. This is also a thing I've been thinking about as we have been sharing because we come from a lot of the same place in this Western magic place. And there's a thread on Substack that had mentioned my name regarding the mystery school, and they were, they're thinking about bringing together a lot of different schools of thought into like I said, make it a big Harry Potter school with all these different thoughts. Is that we're sharing the same things, but in our own signature. And I think of the beehive is because what comes from you is going to be heard by certain people, and what comes from me is going to be heard from some people, and vice versa. And that's the beauty of finding one's own signature, which requires this is why I emphasize so much that a person goes direct in inwardly and gets their experience directly rather than going through somebody. I always say, eat the grapes, spit the seeds out. Draw from me and draw from Taylor and draw from everybody else and everything, right? Eat the grapes, spit the seeds out. And then you go inside with it. You have to go crazy, right? You have to fall. You have to hit the wall. You have to. And I think a lot of what affects people on this path, and I know for me, and I think this is systemic, further back in history, the worse it gets with generational child abuse. But I was told what to do. I was told what reality is. I wasn't able to experience it in the orthodoxy in which I grew up with parents that were suffering from generational child abuse. I was told about everything. You can't break the toy. You get punished for breaking the toy because it costs a lot of money for mom. You get shamed for it. No, I'm breaking the toy. It's an act of creation. How about you bought it for me so I could take it apart, right?
right, right, it is, and it's interesting, isn't it? How people can like give us something and still be very much invested in the fact, well, I gave it to you, so it's still mine. I have a saying that applies to this, which is that sometimes you have to go crazy in order to find sanity.
Beautiful. Yeah, that's that in through the outdoor business. And that's what the Zen Cone is about. Crack it on the head. And people resist this for good reason because having a psychotic break in fun, losing a self that you were really committed to isn't fun. But that's
No,
what
it's
the word
not.
that's what the word initiation is about. It didn't stop. Didn't stop in 2025, folks. Initiations didn't stop. I don't care how much of New Age books are accessible to you. It didn't stop. And it's that process of walking through those doorways in the inside because we all come from we're all little creatures, right? And so we have all this emotional history you know, uh, that is locked away within us. Christopher says The Mastery of Self by Don Miguel Ruiz Jr. Yeah, he's what was it? The four,
I think.
the four agreements. Yes. Is a fabulous book to assist with the preparation work of awareness. I would agree. And that book came out, gosh, in 2000, God, maybe 1999. It was early on. That book became very popular because it was so practical. If I remember correctly. Do you remember, Taylor?
I don't remember. It was a long time ago, but I've read the Four Agreements, and that was a really good book. So, I
Yeah.
think it's a good way to approach life.
All right. So that kind of keeps us up so we have Mark Neglin. I just want to thank everybody for showing up on these streams. I'm glad that this information is speaking to people. I want to say hi to Sheena, Jimmy Oakland, Peta Luez Con Z. Some of these tough ones, I hate to hack your name, but
And I get that. I feel the same way. It's like, yeah, yeah.
yeah, I'm trying. Sheena said earlier the Zombie Apocalypse Call Center series is Taylor's fiction. It's a lot of fun.
Yep.
Ishmael Did you want to touch on that, Taylor?
Well, yeah, I have written. I actually have a couple of fiction series. I have a superhero trilogy that I wrote, and then I have which is about this hero who has to go to remedial flying school because he can't. He's not flying very well. And so his misadventures, and then the zombie apocalypse call center, which is really kind of a humorous take on customer service during a zombie apocalypse. Like what happens when you actually have a zombie apocalypse call center.
You would imagine that they would, right? Um, I want
But
to say hi to
imagine.
Gnostic. I want to say hi to Gnostic Awakening, Elizabeth Blackthorne. Hello, hello. Hey, I sent you a title of one of the articles that we are going to co-create together. Um, we're both working on a couple articles. Let me see here. Stacey Adair Hickson. Hello, hello. Theo Frostis Vaughn. Hello, hello. Catherine Elizabeth Anchor. Yeah.
Like Theo actually had a question for us too.
Who does?
Theo, he said, "Might you guys wax lyrical on the topic of hospitality and service to others?"
Huh. Might you? I would love
It's
for
toward the
you to.
bottom. So.
What's that?
It's toward the bottom of all the notes here that we're getting.
Yeah, I would love for you to maybe rephrase that a little bit. At least for me, I'm not quite. I don't want to guess at what you're asking. Maybe you could re-ask that in a little bit clearer. Hey, Elizabeth says, I got your message. I'll send one back today. Awesome. We're in the creative fire is, let me see here. The mastery of self is written by his son and came but in 2016. Oh, yeah. Okay. Of the Four Agreements, the author of the Four Agreements. The mastery of self is written by his son. Okay. Can you talk about the importance of hospitality to others as a path?
Mm.
How
That's a
about
good
it?
question. Yeah. The way that I kind of look at it is that hospitality is part of how we create community. Like right now, what you were just doing with, each of the people's names, acknowledging them, saying hello, like a person on it, that's a form of hospitality. I'm going to actually remember to do that for our Substack. So Sheena, make a note of it because I know she's watching right now. It's a good idea
You were doing it. I think you were doing it on the stream.
to some degree, but I mean, I think you did it a little more. And I mean, that's just the lesson you can take,
Okay.
that's a good
Yeah,
learning
yeah.
and I'll take it. And I mean, this is a good example too here, folks, of learning in the moment and being like open to the learning because I think it's really important. So, I just, I appreciate that. But for me, hospitality is really, there's a sacredness to it. I mean, there's, the stories of like the angels or the gods who come to somebody's home. And like, it's like, you know, how the people treat them. They don't know that they're angels or gods, but like lo and behold, depending on how they treat them, the way they get treated in return could be,
Yeah.
like, oh, the god who was like treated poorly, well, he decides to turn them to salt or something like
Yeah.
that. So on the one hand, there's kind of the notion of like you never know who's coming to your door. Like be careful like how you treat them. But I think ultimately hospitality is kind of a sense of sacred. There is a sacred service to it. Like if
Yes.
I have somebody to come visit me, I want them to feel comfortable and safe. I want them to feel like they have a home away from home. I had a friend of mine, and this was earlier this year. He was driving back home, but like along the way, his truck got had an issue, and he wasn't far away from Eugene, so he was like, "Hey, can I stay with you?" And I was like, "Of course, you can come stay with me." And so for those few days that he was here, while he was waiting to find out what was going to happen with his truck, I made sure that he had a place to sleep. I made sure he had good food. We got into some good conversations, and we did our own thing too a lot of the time, but the important thing for me was that in that experience that he came out of it knowing like that he was taken care of.
Mm.
And that's really like an important aspect of, hospitality. Like, are we taking care of the people that come into our lives? And, it's part of the way that I liken it is that I would hope that someone would want to take good care of me,
Mm.
in the moment. And I've certainly had that experience. Like I said a few weeks ago, when things happened the way they did, I definitely felt taken care of in a lot of different ways by people. And part of it ultimately was I had to take care of myself too. Like it was a very powerful experience where, a lot of ego got kind of stripped away in the process, which was a good thing. I needed it clearly.
Um, so my take on the question, the inquiry is, um, there's also a judgment if one isn't hospitable. I think true liberation and true freedom is to be able to speak your mind when it needs to happen. Perfect example. There's a person where I write, there's a few people that come wandering around the path the place where I write in the mornings. And this one particular person imposes his opinion on everybody, just steps right into a person's field and just starts imposing it. I'll immediately say, walk away. And if it comes out of me, they might get a Zen smack. I never know. I might something else might happen, right? So immediately I think about that, and not to to realize that the spiritual path isn't about being good or being nice. It's about being awake and being honest and real and authentic. Having said that, I think as a result of the path is kindness, because one has realized the other is self.
There's a real
You're
difference
familiar?
between greatness and kindness.
Yes, and somebody I want to talk about just real quick is the magic of may I. And I learned this from Drumbalo. You know who Drumbalo Melchizedek is? The
Hmm.
flower of life.
Hmm.
So I live in Sedona, so I've had many, many conversations with Drumbalo. And for those of you who don't, he was the one who brought the flower of life to the planet. And he's one of the main reasons why I came to Sedona. Um, Back when it first came out. And then it just grew from there. But I noticed qualities about him. And it's a quality. It's not like there's a sense of I'm being hospitable because I'm going to get something out of it. Or, in other words, it wasn't this sense of, not saying that it's bad that a person is saying, I want to be kind and want to be hospitable. But is it coming out of your being as a result of one's inner path? And Drumbalo has got this beautiful innocence about him and this presence. Now, I've also seen Drumbalo. I've seen the dragon come out. It's rare because he's such a sweet creature, right? One thing I learned that came naturally, and I would say that I think this will happen. This happens to everybody as their inner soul flower grows, because they're given respect to themselves and they've developed that relationship over time. What's natural is to ask, "May I?" And I think in my way of experiencing this is one of the most magical things that can grow naturally out of somebody, because you're always asking permission. And that's when I first got that, was from Drumbalo, is to ask permission. So if people impose their opinion on, they just give their opinion, right? Or they tell you what they think, blah, blah, blah. Like we're here it's welcome because it's what we're doing, right? But it's such a powerful thing when someone says, may I share something with you? Not can I, may I share something with you?
Hmm.
Asking the question. And it energetically changes. I get goosebumps talking about it. It changes everything. I'm literally getting goosebumps at the back of my head and over the top right now, just from that simple little, what I would call a pearl. So I would say that there are those who would do hospitality. There's a range here, right? There's some that would do it because I'm supposed to do it. Let's say from an Orthodox Christian perspective, I'll be rewarded if I'm hospitable, right? And then there's just the natural, this is happening, right? The sense of true soul expression. That was a good question.
Yeah, thank you for the question, Theo.
And I think that I don't see any more questions, but you're welcome to share more. I know I can be long-winded.
Well, I have to say, I really appreciate the invitation to the show. I enjoy doing these live interviews myself. Sometimes it's me and Sheena talking about a topic. Sometimes it's me interviewing someone like yourself. It's always fun to do these things, and I think it's a really great example of just like how collaborative we can all be together and what we can learn. So, thank you for having me on here. It's such an honor to be here.
It's been totally my pleasure. I was really looking forward to it, and I think it's been a juicy conversation. So
Yeah,
yeah,
I think too that like you popping on the show the other day because you're like, oh, I don't normally do that. I think it was kismet. It needed to happen.
yeah, yeah. I was just laughing at myself because I was like, "Oh no, we're gonna have a
And then you
conversation."
stayed anyway
Do I
for a
leave?
while, so clearly you're drawn in. So I was glad that you were
Yeah.
there. I appreciated
Well,
it.
Well, I'm glad I got notified, because now I'm forming this part of this community now. So before, when I first got here, I'd be notified of stuff, but I don't know who you are. And I was, and there's a lot that happens too. So you almost can't keep up with it, where now I'm starting to recognize people. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate you sharing your wisdom with the community. And I look forward to more of how your project is unfolding, and maybe we can do this again sometime. So thank you so much.
Yeah, or you can come on to my show. Either way, we'll do it.
Give me an invitation.
All right, I will.
Okay, sounds good, Taylor. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye bye.
I take care.